So let's talk about what neurodivergence actually looks like in a marriage. If you're in a relationship where ADHD or autism is part of the picture, you sometimes feel confused, misunderstood, or exhausted by patterns you can't quite name. This video is for you.
This is our life. Not to be cynical, but any marriage is hard. A strong marriage takes understanding and dedication, but being neurodivergent makes relationships even more difficult. What does neurodivergence look like day to day inside a marriage? We've learned that understanding is key. By the end of this, you will have language for what is happening and clarity about how to respond instead of assuming the worst.
And there's one pattern almost every neurodivergent couple misinterprets that quietly creates distance. We're going to come back to that before we finish. Before we get into this, if you're new here, I'm Ryan. I'm on the autistic spectrum, and this channel is about building stronger relationships and more intentional lives.
And I'm Lori, wife of Ryan. I was diagnosed with ADHD. And when we talk about neurodivergence in marriage, we are not speaking from theory. We are speaking from lived experience.
We've had to learn this the hard way, and what we're sharing today is what actually changed things for us. One quick thing before we continue, though, we're not therapists or counselors.
And we are just sharing what we have learned through our own experience.
If you are in a relationship that feels unsafe or abusive, please reach out to a qualified professional for help. Let's start with the area where most neurodivergent marriages feel tension: communication. If you've ever thought, why are we as a couple talking about two completely different things right now? This is probably why. Neurodivergent communication differences are not personality quirks.
ADHD brains tend to process externally, often verbally and quickly.
Autistic brains often process internally,
Silently.
and deeply. That alone creates friction. I tend to think before I speak. I need time. If I'm interrupted, I can lose my entire train of thought. When communication moves fast, I can still be on sentence 1 while the conversation is already on sentence 5. When couples do not understand this, they start telling themselves a story about why the other person is acting like that.
Like, you're not listening to me. You're overreacting, or you don't care.
What's actually happening is you're processing differently. When we understood this, we stopped labeling or criticizing each other and started naming the process. I would say, I need a minute to think. Or Lori would say, I'm thinking out loud, listen, but don't try to solve this. That one shift removed so much tension.
And communication is overarching in its importance, but a deeper strain shows up in emotional connection, which we'll talk about next.
If you are listening to this and thinking, this sounds like us, but I'm not even sure which pattern we're dealing with, we put together a free relationship friction quiz. It helps you identify the main pattern in your relationship that may cause tension, so you're not just guessing. You can find that quiz in the link in the description below.
You don't need identical communication styles. You need translation and understanding. Once you see the difference, you stop blaming yourself and your partner and start adjusting how you communicate. Now let's talk about connections, because this is where couples quietly start to feel emotionally alone in the same room. ADHD often comes with big feelings and quick shifts. I can feel something intensely and want to talk about it immediately, or I repress it and let it build up like a balloon until it's ready to burst. Marriage means being connected with your best friend, right? He should be there with me. But I have learned autistic partners may show up through consistency, loyalty, stability, and problem solving, not always through emotional expressiveness. I may have said, you never open up emotionally, or you don't talk to me. And he's thinking, I show up every day. I handle what needs handling. Isn't that love? One partner may express strong emotions and the other feels flooded and pulls back. Understanding emotional style differences is more than knowing a love language. It prevents you from misreading love. When we stopped measuring love only by our own emotional expression style, connection deepened. If this part stays misunderstood, conflict gets louder. That is where most couples start to believe they are just not made for each other.
Instead of asking why your partner is not loving you the way you prefer, ask and find out how their brain naturally expresses care. That question changes how you see each other pretty quickly. Now, let's move into conflict, because this is where nervous systems collide. Neurodivergent conflict does not look like typical conflict. Under stress, autistic partners may shut down. That is nervous system overload. ADHD partners may escalate quickly. That can be emotional intensity and impulsivity. Without understanding this, shutdown looks like silent treatment, and escalation looks like personal attacks. What is often happening is two dysregulated nervous systems reacting to each other. We had to learn pacing. We had to learn when to pause a conversation. We had to prioritize repair over being right, and I still have a really hard time with that one.
When we started calming nervous systems instead of proving points, arguments shortened dramatically. If this step is ignored, this is usually the moment couples think, maybe we're just too different.
If that thought, maybe we're just not right for each other after all, has ever come up for you, this is another reason why we created a free relationship friction quiz. It helps you see what is actually happening underneath the surface, so you're not just jumping to the wrong conclusion. The link for that is in the description below.
Conflict isn't really the problem. It's when both of you just stay stuck in the overwhelmed state without helping each other out. If you can recognize what is happening in the brain and your body, you can respond instead of react. Here is one that causes resentment if it stays unnamed. Alone time. This surprises a lot of couples. The ADHD brain often craves stimulation and shared energy. Too much isolation can feel like distance, or worse, we seem to forget about our spouse or partner completely. Autistic brains often need significant alone time to recharge. This is how they reset. It is not about pulling away from you. If you do not understand this difference, one partner feels smothered and the other feels abandoned and lonely. This is a huge one that took a lot of time for me to understand. My partner isn't solely responsible for my happiness. I make healthy, needed connections with others in my life to feel fulfilled. And I can relieve him from that pressure. When we started calling it energy regulation instead of emotional withdrawal, the tone changed.
Alone time became intentional, but also connection became intentional. Once we had clarity around expectation, a lot of that resentment faded. If you do not clarify this early, small misunderstandings can stack over time to make marriage toxically filled with loneliness and resentment. Space does not damage a marriage. Undefined expectations do. Define what recharge looks like for each of you so neither person has to guess. Finally, let's talk about daily responsibilities. This is where executive function shows up fast. Executive function differences surface quickly in marriage.
ADHD can affect task initiation, memory, follow through, as well as hyperfocus on some tasks, leading to time blindness.
Autism can bring rigidity, high standards, or deep focus on certain tasks that their partner may or may not see as a priority. Without understanding this, partners get labeled as lazy, controlling, careless, or inflexible. A lot of the time, it's just differences in how their brain handles tasks. We stopped dividing responsibilities based purely on what felt equal and started dividing them based on strengths and sustainability. Structure went where structure fit, and flexibility went where flexibility fit. When responsibilities aligned with wiring, resentment dropped and teamwork increased. And this ties back to the pattern we mentioned at the beginning. When executive function differences are misread as character flaws, couples start questioning compatibility.
Design your system around how your brain functions. That keeps contributions steady and prevents burnout on both sides. Traditional gender rules don't always apply here. Now, here's the pattern most neurodivergent couples misinterpret. Watching other neurotypical couples made us think that there was something wrong with us. But one piece of advice from a couple I thought had it all together was this: marriage does not work like a fairy tale. It isn't magically easy and wonderful, and you don't just have a soulmate forever. Being in love and being connected is a choice. Your compatibility is what you make of it. You can be neurodivergent and choose to have a loving and lasting relationship too.
Yeah, couples think they're incompatible when really they're just regulating very differently. When communication, emotional expression, conflict style, alone time, and responsibilities all look different, it can feel like you married the wrong person. Often what is actually happening is two different nervous systems and processing styles trying to operate without a shared framework.
You know, Ryan and I spent the first 20 years of our marriage without any diagnosis at all. And honestly, whether you are autistic, ADHD or not, a lot of what we've learned still applies in many marriages. If any of this resonates with you, you may be in the right place to learn a little bit more with us.
If you want clarity on what is actually happening in your relationship, go take our free relationship friction quiz. It will show you your main friction pattern and give you a starting point on how to fix it. The link is in the description below. If you stop assuming the worst and start learning the patterns, you can replace confusion with clarity and criticism with empathy. You don't need a different partner. You just need a better way to understand what's actually happening. If this helps, subscribe for more honest conversations about marriage, neurodivergence, and building connections that actually fit your brains. And tell us in the comments what pattern you recognize in your relationship.